One of the real gifts of thinking, when we're practicing it well, is clarity. Clarity for ourselves and for other people. Welcome to Unlocking the Power of Your Personality Type. I'm your host, Samantha Mackay, lead trainer at Truity, certified coach and trainer, and long-time believer in the power of using personality type for personal growth. It's important to remember that your four-letter Myers-Briggs type is not a box. It's not something you're stuck inside of, limited to just expressing those preferences. Instead, I want you to think of it like a platform for understanding your natural strengths, your natural weaknesses, and as a guide for where you can grow. And in this series, we're looking at your Myers-Briggs type as a series of processes, not as preferences. And this allows us to look at the 8 elements of personality as individual tools that you can use to help you navigate the hurdles that arise on the way to achieving your goals and aspirations. And in this episode, we're talking about thinking and how to use the thinking part of your personality to have clarity in your life. And this applies whether you're a feeler or a thinker. There's always times when we could step into parts of our personality that we haven't been using with as much skill or nuance as we'd like. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about how thinking helps you create clarity, why we avoid thinking, and then 4 strategies to help you start practicing and honing your use of this part of your personality. So how does thinking benefit us? What does the practice of thinking and leaning into that provide? Well, thinking is very task-focused. And when we're task-focused, we're looking for the most efficient way to complete or achieve that task or goal or project as quickly as possible. And in order to achieve that, we need clarity. We need to know exactly what needs to be done, who needs to do it by, how much time, money, and other resources do we have, what is the most efficient plan or way to get to that outcome or goal, what are the principles we need to work by, how does the system that we're involved going to affect what we're doing. So we become hyper-focused on creating clarity and ensuring everyone knows exactly what's involved, what we have to work with, and what are the constraints. And one of the outcomes of that is we become more direct, we become more assertive, we become more clear with our communication, our directions, and our delegation in order to increase that efficiency and achieve whatever the goal or objective is. Because when we're in that thinking mode or when we're focused on a task, confusion is the enemy of progress. And so we want everyone to know exactly what their role is, exactly where they stand, what they have to do, what those requirements are. So the question I have here is, if you could be very task focused right now, how would that help you? If you could let go of worrying about other people's feelings and the relationships in your life, what would you focus on? What would be your goal or objective? What would you like to achieve? So why do we avoid this practice of thinking? Well, when we're task focused, it means we're naturally placing less emphasis on our relationships or the people in this equation or their feelings, the social connections, and that cohesion that holds groups of teams together. It means ignoring how you feel about something or how someone else feels about something. It really is that practice of tough love. And for many people, that can feel a bit mean, it can feel inappropriate, it can feel a bit blunt, and it can feel like you're undermining or pushing away something that's very important to you. And so that's when we start to worry about other people's feelings. We become less direct, we beat around the bush a bit more in our communication, we become a bit vague, and we reduce the clarity of our communication because we become more focused on trying to maintain those relationships and being tactful rather than being direct and risking being tactless. And while thinking is very well suited to many workplaces, it can feel ill-suited to social settings and relationships where really accounting for someone else's feelings is part of that process. But regardless of the environment, there are times when it's really beneficial to be able to step back and really observe what's going on, where that confusion is, and where clarity might be required. And so the question I have for you here is, if you could step back and look at your life, look at your projects and your relationships, your tasks and your goals, and ask yourself, where's the confusion? Where are the situations where I haven't created enough clarity for myself or given enough clarity to other people to ensure that this task progresses smoothly and to everyone's benefit, including your own? So now let's talk strategies to help you practice using that thinking part of your personality. And remember, this isn't foreign to you. You have been using thinking all your life. Remember back to high school where you couldn't escape doing maths or science, computing or something technical. And we're really called on to use our thinking skills in some of those classes. Or you even use it in the workplace when it comes to budgeting or analysis. So we've all used the thinking part of our personality, but we're now going to just use it with a little more nuance and skill. So the 4 strategies we're going to talk about today are assert, define, analyze, and critique. So let's start by talking about assert. And this is where we're going to be assertive with our language and how we communicate with people. We're going to aim to say what's on our mind without sugarcoating. We're going to say no to the things we don't want to do. We're going to say what is on our mind as clearly and directly as possible. And remember, as Brené Brown said in Dare to Lead, clear is kind. And so the more clarity people have, the less they'll be confused, frustrated, or irritated. So look at some situations where you've used indirect language, where you haven't felt comfortable being as clear or direct as you know you could be. And reflect on those situations, look at the consequences of not being clear and direct, and think about how you might change or shift what you might say or respond in the future. I've watched several feelers in action really struggle with this because even when they're practicing being more direct, sometimes thinkers just don't hear it. They don't hear that there is criticism or feedback coming in there. And so sometimes we have to push ourselves a little bit out of our comfort zone when it comes to trying to be more clear or more kind in our communication. And also take a look at some recent situations where you said yes when you really wanted to say no. What were you feeling at the time? What were you afraid of happening? And how might you shift into saying no and being clear about what you want when you go into those conversations the next time around? Next, let's talk about define. And this is about defining the problem you're solving with as much clarity and objectivity as possible. What we really want to do here is ask a series of questions to ensure we understand whatever the project, challenge, or problem is with as much detail and clarity as possible. So ask yourself questions like, what's the real problem you're solving here? Why do you want to solve it? What does success look like? And what does that look like in as much detail as possible? And if we can't achieve success, what does plan B look like? How are we going to measure success? Is it a pass, fail? Is it 80%? Does everyone agree with that? Or does everyone have a slightly different perspective of what success looks like? What's the plan to get there? What's the current strategy you're following? How much time do you have? How much budget? How much resources? How many people are involved? What principles are you applying? Are they appropriate? What assumptions are you making? What data do we need? What obstacles are we likely to face? And the more clarity you have, the smoother the process will go for completing those tasks and getting to success. Next, we're focusing on analyzing. And this is where we break problems down into their component parts, into the tiny little bits that make up all of a problem, and analyze each one to see where it fits, see what's not working, see where the inconsistencies are, and really look at something in both detail but from a sort of a systems view. And so here we're also analyzing cause and effect. What is causing the particular problem or issue that we're seeing? And looking beyond just the surface level, how are all these pieces connected? How far back does this go when we think about it from a systems perspective? We actually have to go beyond an immediate cause and effect and really analyze where the root cause or the root issue is that we need to consider and analyze and look at solving. There's a couple of ways you can practice this for yourself. So make a list of some recent decisions you made and review them to see if they were logical. What principles or objectives did you base that decision on? And yes, you are looking to remove feelings from this, and it's to assess and understand what your decision-making criteria were and analyze it against those. And did it live up to it? What was the process you took to reach that decision? You can also look for situations in which you felt offended, whether that was from a conversation or from something you read, in some way that triggered you to feel offended. And then go back and look at the reasons that the person who made those statements may have had for saying that. What would be their logical reasons, principles or assumptions or beliefs that made whatever they said appropriate for them? And another way you can practice this is to review some of the plans you have coming up. Look for obstacles that might get in your way, look for inconsistencies, look for things that are missing that you haven't considered. Really analyze what's coming up for you and look at anything that might derail it. A really simple way to practice this is to analyze how you get to work every day. Take a look at anything that's going to derail your plans for tomorrow. Are there outages with the trains? Are we expecting bad weather? Is there construction around where you go, or has there been an accident? And then analyze different ways that you could get to work. What are all the different possible routes you could take using different modes of transport? And really consider which is the most efficient, whether that's just for tomorrow or going forward on a more long-term basis. And you could play this out on a wider scale, looking at your life goals and things that are derailing or likely to derail you achieving your goals in life. Now let's talk about critiquing. And this is where you give critical feedback to someone about their work, observing and noticing all the flaws, inconsistencies, the things that don't make sense, and just anything that doesn't add up. This is where you also ask for feedback yourself on all the flaws that someone else can see in your work or your plans. And this doesn't mean that feedback can't be given with compassion, but it's also providing clarity over what someone sees as not working and providing you with an opportunity to improve it. You can also practice this simply by looking for flaws in any systems or products or machinery or relationships that you're a part of and use on a very regular basis, and aim to identify ways in which each of those could be improved. And for all those improvements, look for the one that would have the highest leverage. So if you've identified 5 possible improvements, which one would have the most bang for its buck, that would make the greatest change with the least amount of effort? Another way to practice this is to listen carefully the next time someone is making a presentation, a pitch, or an argument in a meeting that you're attending. Listen for where their argument is supported by data and principles, and listen for where it isn't. Listen for where the statements aren't quite connected and there is an inconsistency in what they're trying to convince you of. And then simply ask them about that thing that you've noticed that doesn't quite align. What's going on in that gap there? There you have the 4 strategies to help you practice and build skill and nuance around that thinking part of your personality. Assert, define, analyze, and critique. And so my final question for you is, how are you going to create clarity in your life today? Is it about being more direct in your communication? Is it about being more assertive? Is it about critically analyzing some of the tasks, projects, or relationships you're a part of? But whatever you choose to do, let me know how you got on in the comments below. I'd love to hear, what did you try? What did you discover? What do you do next time? And what advice might you have for someone else? And so that's it for our thinking episode. Stay tuned. Feeling is coming up next.